As Lisa mentioned, I'm Dr. Charmain Jackman. I love supporting the arts, and my company does a lot of work with artists and arts production companies. So I would love to have you start by introducing yourselves and which film you're associated with. Then I have a couple questions, and then we'll open it up for the audience.
My name is Michael Bueno, and I made El Colmadon.
My name is Will Zavala, and I was the co-director of For Women of Dominican.
My name is Pauline Greenlick, and I'm producer and co-director of For Women of Town.
My name is Kiara Andrade Howell. I'm not a filmmaker, actually. I work at Frugal Bookstore. Lorenzo Bradford is the filmmaker for Poetry of Final Luxury, and so I'm just here representing for Frugal.
Excellent, thank you. So I know the hour is late, so I'm going to get straight into my questions. So I was really moved by all of the films that we saw, the stories, and they really highlighted the importance of creating spaces for gathering as to keep cultural traditions alive, for storytelling, for healing, for music, for dance, for fun. It was just so powerful, all the stories. And I think about spaces up for Barbados, and so we have the rum shop, we have the beach right there. These are spaces where we gather and tell stories. There's a quote from The Last Dance, which says, "The physical building might go, but the moments, memories, and history we create, that's infinite. It will exist in the hearts and minds forever." So how do we fight for survival and keep hope when our community spaces are being stripped away?
That is a very good question. How do we fight for survival? I think it's fighting, I think the assimilation and preserving the cultural identity that we each have as people from diverse backgrounds. I think for my film, it was very much like highlighting a lot of those. That rejection of assimilation, going to a bodega, listening to the music, talking in Spanish. I think that's also just sharing the stories, making those experiences so I can pass it down to my generation, the next generation, my kids, and so on and so forth. So I think that's how I would like that.
I would say working at the bookstore sometimes feels very intimate because you learn a lot about your customers, their personalities, what kind of books they like to read. But it's also a place of gathering, and so I think one thing that's really important for me is taking the extra step to be in community with people. And so if I see certain books that come out or that we have restocked, reaching out to customers that I know would be interested in letting them know, but also making sure the space is accessible through events, but also through having certain access points within the bookstore for people of all ages and various cultures and interests.
The word survival is an enormous word from what I experienced in Uganda. The 4 women that you saw represent thousands and thousands of women and men who have survived. When Will and I met and narrowed it down to the 4 women, we asked them the same questions. Many of the questions were really very strong, like, well, it started out, what's your name? Where do you live? How many children do you have? And then as we answered the questions more, or asked the questions more and more, it was like, well, what was your experience like in the war? And it's amazing how matter of fact they answered. And then we said, what were you? Were you a soldier? Were you a wife? And they oftentimes, all of them were both. And yet again, when they were telling us the story of what they had endured, it was just very matter of fact. Then I asked them, did you ever kill anybody? I mean, were you raped? What was it like living and giving birth in the bush? And then you look at them when you turn away your tape recorder and your camera and you see a survivor. It was just so overpowering and overwhelming to see how these women are pursued, and it drives me every day to think, there is.
Thank you. I think in the Four-Gal Woman and in your story, for the bodegas, one of your bodega owners, Raphael, said, "This is therapy for me." So I'm a therapist. So I wanted to highlight that. And we saw that, you know, I'm curious for him, therapy meant support. There were like these social services component about supporting people in the community who didn't have. Lending people money, people could get food if they needed to and pay later when they could afford. The stories about the women, that community center, their art pieces, their art making, right? That community experience that was about therapy, that was healing. So say more a little bit about the people that you highlighted in your stories. What did therapy or support mean for them? What did it look like? It was not going into an office and meeting with somebody like me and having a therapy session, right? But there was something healing in the process, in those spaces.
Yeah, it's, I think it's therapy, you know, it's hard for, I think, people in the Caribbean, from that perspective, like to say that and acknowledge that maybe I do need to talk about this. And I think, like, for example, seeing my mother talk about it a lot, there was like, I think I interviewed my mother for like 2 hours, but I only used a couple sections of it. But she really got into it, and I think for her that was a very therapeutic experience to be able to talk about my upbringing, the difficult choices that she had to make as well. And I think there's a lot of generational trauma and trauma that we sort of experience as immigrants and people that are coming from all over the world. And or just being black or brown in America as well. I think there's a lot of trauma that we don't talk about, and I think those bodegas become like a safe space where like, oh, like you get where I'm coming from type situation. Yeah, if you know, you know. So yeah, and I think it, you know, it was therapeutic for Dominican because it was just highlighting the story, and it's not just his story, but it's kind of like a universal. What I would say is like universal Dominican experience or a universal Caribbean immigrant experience. Coming here not really knowing anybody, I think universal immigrant experience is really the terminology, but I think now I'm just rambling.
I know that in Uganda there's really no infrastructure of psychotherapy. I've heard there's literally like a handful of psychiatrists in the entire country. So if you need help, for instance, if you suffer trauma, you're either going to continue to suffer or you will gravitate towards other people who may have been through something similar. And so that's what we're trying to portray in the film.
For many of us, healing in community is important, right? It's not an isolation or solo experience. I think that my last question for you, and this one also hit home. I am the daughter of entrepreneurs, and I recently wrote a book about entrepreneurship, and I talk a lot about, seeing my parents work really hard to build a legacy, right? There was something that they wanted to do. And I noticed that entrepreneurship was central to all 4 stories, all four films. I think this is an unspoken aspect of culture keepers. There is an economics around it as well, but I would say like a cooperative economics, right? It's not exploitive. I see entrepreneurship as legacy building as well. We are building for the next generation, and we heard that in The Last Dance as well. What is our role as community members to ensure the longevity of these businesses and culture keepers? Because I think particularly we saw the Last Dance, you know, the dance hall, the club, the Jamaican dance hall was closing. We saw the bodegas. We heard those stories about them being less and less bodegas. We know that the Black Dollar lasts about 6 hours in the Black community, right? So we're not supporting our businesses. So what is our role to ensure the longevity of our businesses? What would you want to say for people here and people who would see your film? Like, what is our role to make sure that these businesses, and for Frugal, right? Frugal is one black store, one black bookstore. I think there's one other one now in Boston. What is our ownership in making sure that the longevity and survival of these businesses?
Well, definitely shopping at Frugal, right? Come through, buy your books. We are also at frugalbookstore.net, so you can shop with us online. I think also we're in, you know, the age of Amazon, and so being aware of our expectations. We're not, any small business, they're not going to be as fast and quick as Amazon, but by shopping with us and other local businesses, the money is circulating in our community. And so the other thing too that I think is special about Frugal and speaks to this question is how they were able to be in Nubian Square. As a lot of y'all know, they started out in the mall on Warren Street, but Mclean was actually part of why they were able to secure that space. And he also made it so that you can only purchase his books through Frugal Bookstore. And so if you see a chain of change on Amazon, it's been, you know, resold, right? But I think being intentional about the things that you create and who you're creating with is a way to fulfill that. And I think also just coming in, even if you're not shopping, like meeting up with your friends at Frugal, in the same way that you would meet up at a Dudley Cafe or somewhere else, so that you're in the space. A huge piece of healing that happens in the store is that you see people reconnect. I've witnessed people who haven't seen each other in years. They'll see each other at the bookstore, and then you get to witness this experience. And so I feel like that's just as essential to helping us sustain ourselves.
Entrepreneurialism and business is really a big, important factor in what the projects that we are involved in. My husband, who's sitting there, in Uganda. We've been working in Uganda since 2008. And we work with the hidden people, and this includes not only the women that you saw in the film, but also acid attack survivors, people with disabilities, blind people, people from Kadwe slums, etc., people who are hidden or disabled, and they really are hidden in Uganda. We supply for them finance to help with their microloans, and this gives them an unbelievable boost. You have no idea what a $50 microloan can do to help these women. As you saw, Rose in her little market, and the chickens, and the crafts, and the wine. And that wine is really, really good.
I think from like my perspective, it's the goal, I think, of my project was to get people to your friendly neighborhood bodega, really just to chat with the individuals and get to know them and just take a moment. And I think for me, it was just like making a film about this, not only kind of honored the hard work that my mother did as a woman in a male-dominated industry, yeah. And I think making this film, the goal was always to just have people go in, support these businesses, and just really support other businesses that are like this, not just Dominican, you know, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like we're all we got, and we are sort of, we have like an obligation to really help each other out, because we're really the only ones that understand each other in a way.
And it also, I've gone into bodegas, but I really didn't understand the social piece, so when I go back in, I'll make sure I have a conversation with the owners. I want to open up for a couple questions, so any burning questions? And I'll do my Oprah in here.
I wanted to thank all of the filmmakers for just a wonderful presentation, and also to ROXFILM for bringing these voices and stories to life, and which has just been wonderful. And one of the things I want to talk about or ask about is why film? You know, there's so many ways that we can tell stories. There's so many depictions of our people in lots of different ways. Why film? And especially at this time when there's so many actions to sort of quiet our voices. Why did you each decide to choose film as the vehicle? I think it's powerful.
Well, actually, so I worked with Lou and Pauline, and Pauline's been making a lot of films as they've been in their work over in Uganda, and then they brought me on to do kind of a more bigger project. And for a moment, I tried unsuccessfully to convince them that instead of making a documentary, we should make a website, because the website would then, you could be continually updated. And one thing that's characteristic of their lives is that their lives are always changing. And you know, they kind of live on the fringes, and so they have to be nimble and you know, just to make a living, that kind of thing. And so a website would enable, you know, for instance, Americans to communicate with them, possibly send funds, but basically just portray their lives in the current state. But there's limitations to that too. Just because I don't think, you know, visiting the site, you'd have to continue to visit, and you just can't experience some of the complexities, I think, of life that for me a film can do, because you have, you know, you have audio, you have video, you have, you know, all the tools of cinema that I feel like that you can get closer to, you know, the experiencing what they did.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, why film? Images, making images is really the only thing I know how to do. But no, I think really the biggest thing was to really, I think, telling the story about culture. It's seeing, it's when you see images of like the food being cooked, it's like almost like you kind of smell it as well, hearing it. And I think why film is because it was the most digestible to be able to encapsulate that feeling and that sort of memory and kind of feed it to somebody in a way. So that's why.
Thank you so much for sharing your films. I was wondering, in settings where, especially with stories that are so personal and possibly traumatic, and in a day and age where people are less likely to be open to sharing their stories, how you make sure people are willing to, you know, reveal their truths in a way that's, you know, especially in a setting where it's so formal and you put a camera in their face and you have these set questions. How do you make sure people are open and honest with you?
And also, like, how do you make sure that they feel protective of those stories too, right? That they know who will see this and the extent that these stories will go. I will add that piece to your question.
Well, I can imagine my situation. Your mother was a bodega owner, and so yeah. But maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah. So that person, I always joke around because I always say that person that you saw on camera is a paid actor. But that is, yeah, making it comfortable, I think, for her in particular, because she's, you know, she raised me as a single mother, and she kind of ruled with an iron fist, but for all the right reasons. So I think I didn't realize I had made it a safe space for her to just share the stories. But I think it's just, I don't know, it's just the way I approach these individuals, and just I'm genuinely curious about all of it, and they just kind of just start telling me these stories, and I just listen and listen. And it, doesn't, I try not to be, show like a face that kind of like reacts to a lot of the stories that I hear, so I just sit there and I listen, and I think that makes them comfortable.
We made a decision that which addresses your question, which is that all our interviews were audio only, and there are a couple of sit-down interviews, but those were actually done a few years before we did the principal shooting in this. And there's practical reasons for that, which is that you don't have to set up lights and that kind of thing. But the other thing is that it felt just more like a conversation, and than pointing a camera at people, and so that's why you're just hearing interviews.
Now, I made about 30 films in Uganda, and over all these years, I've built up a series of feeling of trust. So it's not just like I came into Gulu and said, I'm going to make a film. They knew who I was, they knew what I was doing, and I always made sure, do you really understand that this is going to be seen over the world? And their answer to me was, we want our stories told so that this will not happen again and that we will not be forgotten. And with the way the world is now, no one's going to even remember this. And I'm here to make sure everybody does.
Yeah, trust was an important factor. I'm talking from the perspective of being filmed. Lorenzo, the filmmaker, he was very intentional about explaining the process to us, but also respecting the fact that Clarissa and Leonard are running a business. And so that first scene with Leonard talking and wrapping up the books, I wasn't even aware that that was filmed because I'd only seen them in the store during open hours. So I feel like that's a result of Lorenzo having built that trust with Leonard to where he took him into a more personal side of the business.
I don't know if you have time, but thank you. Thank you to all of you who presented these amazing layered African, intersections with Latin communities, Caribbean communities, local communities, and New York communities, and Boston communities. I appreciate that you showed this, the shared humanity of everybody. It wasn't so much as a question, it's just a show of thanks, because I appreciate ROXFILM. I appreciate all of you for just sharing the stories. It's very humbling and just very moving. And just so thank you, and continue to do this good work.
My last question is, what's next? Do you have anything else coming up? And are there ways that we can continue to support you in your work as well? This is a nice shout out,
So bad as I'm talking about myself. What's next? I'm planning on, I'm looking pretty. I'm planning on revisiting a lot of the work I did in grad school, and just kind of trying to really identify how I can elevate some more stories from my cultural background and just learn my community in general. So that's what's next, and I guess I post a lot of my professional work on like my Instagram.
Which is?
Michael, the number 0, and then Bueno, B-U-E-N-O. That's on Instagram. Then my website is just michaelbueno.com. So a lot of my professional work, I use my Instagram sort of like an extension of my professional work. So that's how you can follow.
Well, getting a film done is kind of hard to do. My next project that I'm hoping to get off the ground would be based in Nepal. I have a friend in Kathmandu, and I have I've always been very concerned about the environment and about climate change, and I'm a filmmaker, but I haven't really blended the two. But Nepal is one of those countries that's one of the inland countries that's most impacted by climate change, because we have melting glaciers, which causes floods, but then you have droughts and all this kind of thing. So anyway, we're hoping to do kind of a hybrid fiction documentary portraying how the lives of people who live off the land is affected by things like climate.
Right working with a composer, performer, Mike Stout from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I do his music videos. So I just completed 2 music videos, Women of Steel and First Responders, honoring our brave police and firemen and EMTs. I just also finished 2 weeks ago my latest documentary, A Hobo in the Great Depression. And it is about hobo diaries that I have. And he had visited 142 cities over 4.5 months. And I found a little app on my computer where I have a little train that goes all around to show where he went and to describe the life of a hobo. And I got like 31,000 views on YouTube. I'm shocked, I don't believe it, but that's what the number says, so it's exciting. And then I'm also working on the story of a woman, Alice Lind, who's 94 years old. I've been filming her for 2 years now. She's an amazing woman, a lawyer, still practicing law in 94, and works with prisoner rights.
So you can visit our website, frugalbookstore.net, to not only shop for books, but also keep up with events that we have coming up. The next event that's coming to mind is July 26th with Terry E. Carter. He is the former poet laureate of Medford. And so, yeah, that's something that we're excited about. We also have, if you've been to the bookstore, we have like our main sections, but we've decided to create some collections. So right now we have the Bell Hooks collection, and then we have the Malcolm X collection, where we're compiling books written by them or about them. So that's something worth checking out. And then you can follow us on Instagram @frugalbooks. That's where we post about all our upcoming events and new books that we just got, books that are coming out soon. So yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you again for sharing your wonderful stories. Thank you for being here, and thank you to ROXFILM.